Shalom, brothers and sisters. Thank you for listening. Before I get started, I would like to say if you like these videos, please like and subscribe and share. Now, I would like to get started by the verse in Exodus 21:10, where it says that if a man takes another wife, then her food, clothing, and sex shall not be diminished. Now, if your interpretation of biblical marriage goes against this, then your interpretation is wrong because the Bible does not contradict itself. So if you say that because God created Adam one wife that we are only supposed to have one wife, that contradicts, then your statement is contradictory to Exodus 21:10. So that one of a few things have to be, then you have to say either I am wrong because my interpretation cannot violate Exodus 21:10, or you have to say that the Bible is wrong. And I've also heard it stated that, especially when it comes to that verse, that is just God regulating sin, which is quite frankly stupid to say, because God does not regulate sin. He condemns it. He literally condemns sin. And by definition, if the law regulates something, it is not unlawful. It is lawful as long as it stays within the parameters of those regulations. It's common sense. Since that something that's regulated by law cannot be unlawful to do. Especially when if you already state that it's a sin, there is no need to regulate it, because those regulations that literally says as long as you do it like this, it is not a sin. And by the way, whenever you make those statements, how do you determine whether or not something is just a sin that is being regulated or not? You run into a problem, it becomes a slippery slope. That means I can literally say that where the Bible talks about you have to have sex with your wife, that you cannot deny her sex. Well, I can easily make the statement that that's just God regulating a sin, because sex is a sin. Or that when God talks about work, well, that's just God regulating a sin, because work is a sin. Because in the beginning, Adam didn't have to work before God forced them out of the Garden of Eden. There was no work. The only thing that it said that he had to do was God brought forth all the animals and he named them. So that's the problem with saying that God regulates certain sins, and doesn't condemn it. Is that by definition, by the regulating of it, it becomes lawful, thus not a sin. How more clear cut can you get? The only reason why people would say that is, quite frankly, because what they are saying is that I like my interpretation of this, but my interpretation of this violates this verse over here. So in order to make them not contradict, I'm just going to state that this over here is just God regulating a sin. And again, I say, how else can you come up with that? And how can you say somebody's wrong when they do the same thing on something else? Just because you don't like it. If one's right, the other one's right. How can you distinguish? And not only that, where in the Bible does God give us the authority to say something like that? Where does it say that something is a sin, but it's regulated? Nowhere in the Bible does it say that about anything. I know what you're saying is, well, how about when Jesus is asked about divorce, and he said that in the beginning it was not so. So that man, that is written, that man shall leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. But because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed divorce. First of all, there's a couple things you have to understand about this verse. It's not talking about polygyny, which is what most people try to cram and twist it into saying, is literally only about divorce. Jesus was asked about divorce. His answer was about divorce. It was about nothing else. But you got people who will say that it's about polygyny. And now when we go on to the subject of by God allowing it, by regulating it, and saying that, and the Bible also says that the only reason for divorce is fornication. So he is regulating divorce. So God doesn't like divorce at all. But by regulating it, he is also saying that as long as it's in these parameters that I have given you, divorce is all right. So if your wife commits fornication, which is a violation of the biblical laws of sex, then you have the right to divorce her. And it's in Leviticus that we find the majority of what is and what isn't fornication. I mean, it's quite simple to find. Find anything outside of that definition of what the Bible directly calls sexual sin is not a sexual sin. That is you adding to the Word of God, which in and of itself is a sin. Now, shalom, people, and Godspeed.